I was in my 8th grade science class when I first learned about genetic disorders that can occur in the blood. One disorder that caught my attention was sickle cell anemia, and to this day, I still happen to be intrigued by this heavily researched disorder. Now I know what you must be thinking. What is sickle cell anemia? How does one become affected by this disorder? And how does it affect the body? And to these questions come my fantastic answers. Sickle cell anemia was discovered in 1910 and has been recognized as inherited since 1949. Sickle cell anemia is a red blood cell disorder in which there aren't enough healthy red blood cells to carry oxygen throughout your body. This disorder causes red blood cells to take the form of a sickle or crescent moon shape instead of their regular bioconcave shape. Now let's take a closer look. This is a human karyotype for a female who has sickle cell anemia. As you can see, this disorder is caused by a mutation in the hemoglobin beta gene, found on chromosome 11, represented as HBB. Now let's go a little bit more into depth. The sickle cell mutation is caused by a mutation in the 6th amino acid of beta globin, where the amino acid valine replaces glutamic acid in the cell, which is represented as an HBS allele. This displacement is called a missense mutation. The cells affected are able to carry oxygen until the cell becomes deoxygenated. When this happens, hemoglobin forms long chains and binds together so the cell permanently changes to a sickled shape and hemoglobin is unable to bind to the cell. Because hemoglobin is what binds oxygen to the cell, oxygen is unable to be transported around the body properly. Sickle cell disease follows a pattern of autosomal recessive inheritance. This means that the gene can skip generations, and that mutations in both copies of the beta globin gene are needed to pass the disease down to offspring. However, something that makes sickle cell anemia unique is that one copy of the mutation can make one a carrier. Being a carrier means that one is codominant, causing an individual to have some sickle cells, but mostly regular blood cells. Luckily, carriers have no prevalent health problems, and also have the heterozygous advantage, which we will discuss later in the video. In the example displayed, we have two parents who are carriers or heterozygous for the disorder. Keep in mind, HBS is the allele for sickle cell disease, and HBA is the allele for normal blood. This image shows parents who have 4 children. One child has the disorder, making them homozygous dominant. 2 children have the sickle cell trait, making them heterozygous, or carriers. And 1 child does not have the disorder, making them homozygous dominant. There are many signs and symptoms that come with this disorder. Signs include lethargy, pale skin, and delayed growth and development in children. The symptoms are periodic pain in the extremities of the body, such as bone pain and chest pain, repeated bacterial infections, and jaundice. Diagnosing sickle cell anemia is fairly simple. Specialized blood tests can inform you if you have the disorder, as well as newborn blood spot screens and blood smears, where you would search for sickled cells. Blood is one of the most important fluids in our bodies because it provides every single cell, tissue, organ, etc. with oxygen and vital nutrients. When someone is affected by sickle cell anemia, their blood is compromised and is unable to do its job properly. All organs can be affected by this disorder because they all need the oxygen that red blood cells provide them with. They can also become damaged because sickled cells cannot flow through small blood vessels such as capillaries, which cause them to get stuck and not move. This is called vasoocclusion. An example of an organ that can be affected by this disorder are the lungs. This is called acute chest syndrome and occurs suddenly when sickle cells stick together and block the flow of oxygen through tiny blood vessels in the lungs. Another organ is the spleen. This is called splenic sequestration and occurs when a backup of blood shrinks the spleen into nothing, which makes one more likely to catch a bacterial infection. These infections can lead to sepsis, also known as multi-organ failure. Sadly, there is no way to prevent sickle cell anemia from affecting offspring if both parents are carriers or if both parents are affected by it. This is because the disorder is genetic, which means the only real way of prevention would be to avoid pregnancy. Because of the lack of prevention, mortality rates for people with sickle cell anemia are high. The life expectancy for one with this disorder is reduced and is put around 42 to 47 years old. When looking at mortality among adults with sickle cell anemia, 18% died from sepsis, 27% died during an acute sickle crisis, 35% died from acute chest syndrome, and 20% died from stroke. But there are several measures that can be taken to help one live comfortably with the disorder. The only cure for sickle cell anemia are stem cell transplants, also known as bone marrow transplants. Bone marrow is the spongy interior of long bones that create blood cells. Bone marrow transplants work by taking a donor's healthy bone marrow and transplanting it into the patient so they can grow and make their own healthy red blood cells. However, because of the high risk of the procedure, they are not done very often. To compensate for the lack of cures for this disease, there happen to be many treatments. Treatments include lifelong blood transfusions, iron chelation, which removes excess iron from donor blood, opioids to help manage pain, drinking at least 8 to 10 glasses of water each day, antibiotics to help treat bacterial infections that are products of splenic sequestration, and the polysaccharide vaccine, which is given to children to help prevent sepsis. Blood transfusions are known to be one of the most common treatments for the disorder. Blood transfusions are a medical procedure where healthy blood is given to an individual through an intravenous line that has been inserted into one of their veins. Donors donate blood, which is processed to ensure it is safe. Then it's given to patients based on their blood type. This is a common treatment for sickle cell anemia patients because the blood transfusion lowers the amount of sickled cells in their bloodstream. However, there are risks to receiving blood transfusions frequently, as blood transfusion risks iron overload and the development of new antibodies against future blood transfusions. Every year, over 300,000 babies with sickle cell anemia are born. Out of this, 100,000 are American births. 1 out of every 365 are Black or African American births, and 1 out of every 16,300 are Hispanic American births. Adding to this statistic, about 1 in every 13 Black African American babies are born with the sickle cell trait. Out of all the regions in the world, sickle cell anemia is said to be most prevalent in West Africa. Historically, the most common location for sickle cell anemia was found to be in West Africa because the HBB mutation originated in countries where malaria was most prevalent. This is believed to be because people who carry the HBB mutation or 1 HBS allele are less likely to have severe forms of malaria. Remember earlier when we discussed the heterozygous advantage? Well, this is it. An individual who is heterozygous for sickle cell anemia has enough sickle cells to be resistant to malaria and enough healthy red blood cells to live a healthy, normal life. Sickle cell anemia is a fascinating autosomal recessive disorder, which provides a lot of valuable information on how genetic disorders work. I hope you enjoyed my video and were able to learn something new about sickle cell anemia. Thank you for watching.